This is the Investor Alliance for Human Rights. As a child of the Star Wars generation, that makes me think that the Alliance is on the good side and that we're fighting against the Empire. Is that a correct assumption?
We're fighting for every person's entitlement to live a life of dignity and equality. That's what we're fighting for.
In the work that you're doing in China, in the Xinjiang Uyghur region, how has the voices of the people who are being impacted influenced the way you approach the work, and why? How do you believe they are helping shape this work versus maybe just the headlines that we hear about what's happening?
So on the Uyghur work, we've really been working very closely with Uyghur human rights groups who are also working with victims, and they have families who've been impacted by the actions and the repression in China. And so by that work, we're really enabled to bring the voices of the people on the ground to the table. They don't have a seat at the table. Investors have a seat at the table. So by doing that, we are creating that ability for us to give voice to the voiceless in that particular scenario, and as well ensuring that any kind of action taken by the company is aligned or with what the impacted people want or see needed in that scenario.
Talk to us as investors as why the solar industry is particularly important.
No, that's great. And thank you, Matthew and UCF. You're taking the lead on one of the engagements with the solar company as well. And the issue that we talk about is really the issue of just transition. So as governments and investors and businesses around the world want to address issues of climate change, we're looking at the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. So everybody wants that to happen. But we want to ensure that that transition is done in a just way. And what we're seeing, and this particularly comes out from the work that you're already involved in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, what we have found out through research that has come into play is that the solar sector, the manufacture of the panels and the raw materials that go into making these solar panels are actually sourced from the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. And hence the repression that is ongoing there, the use of forced labor through the detention of people by the Chinese government goes into the making of those solar panels. We're working with investors to engage with their portfolio solar companies in the US, in Europe, who are buying from these tainted supply chains to say, you need to have a conversation on this. You need to change these practices. And where you're not able to change these practices, you need to disengage from them.
So Anita, on your website at the Alliance for Human Rights, there's a blog post, and it reads, "Global brands must comply with international human rights law." So tell us, what do you mean by that? What are you saying that global brands must comply with international human law? What does that mean to a lay investor? Talk about that for a bit with us.
One of the things that we're pushing with global brands is to say that, you're now a global company. You're operating in markets around the world. You can't just decide to operate in a particular market based on the national laws of that country, which might be less onerous or less rights respecting than maybe even the laws in your own country that you came from. So there's a disparity between national laws, and we don't want companies to be able to play that and work on the lowest common denominator. So you want to use internationally recognized standards. So if you're whether I guess you're a global company or not, but primarily with global companies, you want them to really be looking at global standards. International human rights law is that standard. International human rights laws give people the right. And that's the right that we want to champion for.
I want to thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your important work with our audience today. Thank you.